Right now, someone, somewhere, is asking an AI to write their cover letter. Someone else is using it to plan a vacation. Another person is arguing with it about football. Millions of little conversations happening all at once every single second of every day. And every single one of those conversations is drinking water. Not a lot, not per conversation, but add it up across 1 billion daily queries, multiply by the explosive growth of AI over the next 5 years, and suddenly you're looking at numbers that make people very uncomfortable. Here's the thing though, this isn't a simple story. Because some of those numbers are wildly overstated, some are dangerously understated. And the real issue isn't actually how much water one ChatGPT prompt uses. It's where that water is coming from. So, let's actually figure this out. Imagine you're holding a standard water bottle, the kind you'd buy at a gas station. 500 milliliters, about 16 ounces. A few years ago, researchers at UC Riverside calculated that writing a single 100-word email using an older version of ChatGPT consumed roughly that much water. 1 bottle, 1 email. That number went viral. It spread everywhere. And honestly, it's been causing confusion ever since. Because that figure was based on GPT-3, an older, far less efficient model. It also included the water used to generate the electricity that powered the servers, not just the water used directly for cooling. Newer models are dramatically more efficient. OpenAI's CEO has claimed the average query today uses closer to 0.3 milliliters of water. That's less than a drop. So which is it? A bottle of water or a drop? Both, and neither. And that's where it gets interesting. Here's where you need to understand how AI actually uses water, because it's not what most people imagine. When you think of AI, you probably picture something ethereal, the cloud, invisible, just math floating in the air somewhere. But there's nothing ethereal about it. Every AI response you get was processed by physical servers. Enormous rooms packed floor to ceiling with hardware, running at full capacity, generating tremendous heat. And that heat has to go somewhere. The cheapest, most effective way to cool a giant room full of computers is the same method humans have been using for centuries. Water. Cold water runs through the facility, absorbs the heat from the servers, then gets exposed to outside air, and a portion of it evaporates, carrying the heat away. Simple, effective, and it requires a constant, steady supply of fresh, clean water to keep working. Now here's the part that surprises people. Most of that water can't be recaptured. It evaporates. It's gone. And the water these facilities use isn't industrial water. It isn't grey water. In most cases, it's the same drinking quality water that flows from your tap at home. Because impurities in the water damage the sensitive equipment inside. So when an AI data center uses water, it's competing directly with the people who live nearby. Now watch what happens when you zoom out. Google's data centers consumed 6.1 billion gallons of water in 2024. That's up from 4.3 billion just 3 years earlier. Microsoft's water use jumped 34% in a single year, largely attributed to AI expansion. A single Meta facility in Newton County, Georgia, uses 500,000 gallons per day. That's roughly 10% of the entire county's water supply. Just one building. In Iowa, one data center consumed 1 billion gallons in a single year, enough to cover the state's residential water needs for 5 full days. These aren't outliers. Large data centers routinely consume as much water as towns of 10,000 to 50,000 people. And most people who live near them have no idea. But here's where it gets more complicated and more honest. How bad is this really, compared to everything else. Think about a hamburger. The water required to grow the grain, raise the cattle, process the meat. One burger takes somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 liters of water to produce. A cotton t-shirt? Over 700 gallons. The United States has about 16,000 golf courses, each potentially using up to 2 million gallons of water per day. Golf courses. In the desert. In Arizona, where AI data center growth is absolutely exploding, there are more than 370 golf courses. So context matters. When people say AI is drinking all our water, that framing needs some grounding. Agriculture uses roughly 70% of all fresh water consumed globally. AI right now is a rounding error by comparison. The crazy thing is, that's actually the most alarming part of the story. Because AI is just getting started. Estimates that global data centers consumed about 560 billion liters of water in 2023. By 2030, that figure is projected to exceed 1.2 trillion liters, more than double in 7 years. By some projections, AI servers in the United States alone could consume between 200 and 300 billion gallons of water annually by 2030. And the technology is getting denser, not lighter. Newer AI chips are dramatically more powerful and dramatically more heat-generating. NVIDIA has announced upcoming server racks that could consume 600 kilowatts of power each. Average rack density is expected to nearly double between 2023 and 2027. More power means more heat. More heat means more water. Now here's the strange part. The water problem isn't really about total volume, not yet. It's about location. Nearly half of the world's data centers are already located in regions of high water stress. These aren't facilities sitting next to rivers in the Pacific Northwest. They're in Arizona, Texas, Northern Virginia, Spain, Chile, Mexico. In Querétaro, Mexico, where 32 new data centers are currently planned, the state suffered its worst drought in a century in 2024. 17 of 18 municipalities were affected. Families were losing access to drinking water, and at the same time, Microsoft had secured rights to draw tens of millions of liters annually from a local aquifer that was already running a significant deficit. In Chile, Google proposed a data center near Santiago, a city in a region that had been experiencing drought for 15 years. A Chilean court eventually halted it. In Uruguay, also experiencing its worst drought in 70 years, a proposed data center would have consumed the daily residential water needs of 55,000 people in its first phase. In Spain, protesters marched under the slogan, "Your cloud is drying my river." Think about that image for a second. People marching in the streets over someone else's cloud storage. Now here's where AI companies will tell you they're working on it. And some of them actually are. Google has been shifting certain facilities toward air cooling systems that use far less water. Microsoft has committed to being water positive by 2030, meaning they plan to replenish more water than they consume. Several companies are experimenting with locating data centers in cooler, wetter climates, where they can rely on outside air rather than evaporative cooling. There's also a transparency problem being slowly addressed. For years, most companies didn't disclose water usage at all. Now, public pressure and regulatory scrutiny in some regions are forcing more disclosure. The International Energy Agency noted that when companies release their data, researchers and policymakers can actually compare facilities, identify what's achievable, and hold the worst performers accountable. The problem is, disclosure is still voluntary in most places, and water-positive commitments are easier to announce than to verify. So here's the honest summary of where we are. The 1 bottle of water per email statistic is outdated and probably misleading for modern models. Per query, AI's water footprint is genuinely small. Sam Altman's claim of 0.3 milliliters per query is in the right ballpark for direct operational water use. But scale changes everything. 1 billion queries a day, 2 billion, 5 billion by the end of the decade. The individual drops add up to oceans, and those oceans are increasingly being drawn from rivers, aquifers, and reservoirs in places that are already running dry. The water problem with AI isn't that it uses more per interaction than a cheeseburger. It's that it's growing exponentially, concentrating its footprint in specific geographic locations, competing with some of the world's most water-stressed communities, and doing all of it largely invisible to the people who use it every day. You don't see the water when you type a prompt. You don't see the cooling towers. You don't see the aquifer that feeds them. But somewhere, someone does. The next time you open an AI chatbot, the water usage itself isn't really the thing to think about. The thing to think about is this. Every technology we've ever scaled, cars, electricity, smartphones, carried hidden costs that didn't become visible until the scale became impossible to ignore. We're at the early stage of AI's scale. The hidden costs are just starting to surface. And how we respond to them now, through transparency, regulation, and smarter infrastructure choices, will determine whether this story ends with a statistic people share online or something we actually have to deal with. We've made that choice before. Sometimes we got it right. Sometimes we really didn't. The water is already moving.